miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful. When people laugh and dance and struggle as friends, then all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle. People climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak we hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful. When people laugh and dance and struggle as friends, then all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle. People climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak we hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. We lift our hands to welcome the sun.
And from Whispers from Eternity by Paramhansa Yogananda, I will not offer unto thee mind-made hothouse songs. I will sing a song uninfluenced by the voice of any other. I will offer thee my own pristine heart melodies. I will offer thee no intellectual, premeditated, art-disciplined song. What I will offer thee are the wild songs of my heart. I will offer thee not civilized, emotion-packed music or artfully cultivated song flowers, but rather the wild blossoms that grow on the high hills of my soul.
Welcome again to Sunday Service. Welcome to those joining us online. I'm reading from Rays of the One Light. These are weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, written by Swami Kriya-yoga and based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. This week's topic, the best way to worship. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness in your deathless self within. In the chapter 4 of the Gospel of St. John, the woman of Samaria asks Jesus, where is the best place to worship? This question might be expanded to include, what is the best church? What is the best religion? Is it important to go on pilgrimage to holy shrines? What is the best ritual? What is the best mantra or prayer? Jesus cut across all such questioning with his reply. The hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. It was not that outward considerations of place, church, ritual, etc. are irrelevant. Each person should find those practices and observances which are compatible with his own nature, one might say with his own vibrations. Not everyone's natural path is the same. God sent different religions into the world to satisfy different human needs. The overarching concern, however, considering that the goal is to find God, is to include in one's worship daily inner communion with the Lord. God is silence. He must be sought, therefore, in inner silence. God is absolute love. He must be sought, therefore, in the silence of love. God is spirit and thus immaterial. He must be sought above all in the expanding peace of deep meditation. Thus the Bhagavad Gita states in the 6th chapter, sequestered should he sit, steadfastly meditating, solitary, his thoughts controlled, his passions laid away, from every craving for possession freed. Wherever you are, whatever your outward beliefs and observances, seek God in the silence of your own soul. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, everyone. This morning's topic is a wonderful one, the best way to worship. And I'm going to talk about ways that we can make our whole lives an act of worship. Really, our whole lives should be a prayer to God. So how do we go about doing that? Well, this scripture quoted here today, worship God in spirit and in truth. What does that mean exactly? If we think of meditating, we take our bodies, we sit it down in a chair and we do our practices, but we still have body consciousness if we do that. We need to get beyond body consciousness. That's why it's so important to sit and be still, be absolutely still. I know the ear starts to itch, or there's a pain in the back, or your feet aren't quite comfortable the way they are. Ignore it. Well, take the time at the beginning to get the cushion just in the right place, but then let your mind be still, your thoughts controlled, as the Gita says, passions laid away. No more thinking, no more desire, no attachments, nothing. Let it all be laid away. And then just imagine that your sole duty is to be still. Purushottama Selby is coming next Saturday to do a workshop. And he's written several books. And in one of the books, he talks about that there's a place at the top of the head in the brain that its function is to place your body in time and space. It shows you that there's a table over here, and there's a step there, and there's whatever all around you. It locates you. When you are still, that little organ in the brain relaxes and expands so that you become one with everything. So when we say to be still, it's not just for nothing. It's to activate that part of the brain that relaxes and expands your consciousness. So to worship God in spirit means to rise above that body consciousness that's restless and has aches and pains. Yogananda used to say, dump the body. Just get rid of it. And focus at the point between the eyebrows. So when we worship, Swami once said to me, kriya-yoga is the inner arati. It's the inner puja. It's the inner worship service. In the Festival of Light, we'll have a candle and we'll honor each of the gurus. That's a puja, that's an arati, that's a worship service. And kriya-yoga is the inner worship service. So the more that we can do kriya-yoga in that prayerful way, in fact, Lahiri Mahashaya once said, "You are not authorized to think during kriya-yoga." Sorry, just cannot think. It's not an act of thought, it's an act of worship. One time, so it's many years ago, before Swami passed away, Jyotish, who's now the spiritual director of Ananda, asked Swami, it would be nice, some years we've done this in the past, of having a specific prayer that everyone in all the Ananda communities and centers, meditation groups, can say during this year, sort of as a uniting force to say the same prayer together. Nice idea. But Swami's answer was, it's been so long since I prayed with words. And this is reminiscent of something that Yogananda said, I can pray no more with words, but only with wistful yearning. So don't feel as though you have to have a cultivated, art-disciplined prayer song like the Whispers from Eternity was saying, but offer the wild blossom songs of your soul. And it doesn't have to be in words. It can just be in wistful yearning. There's, a friend and I were talking the other day, and she reminded me of this saying of Meister Eckhart, who was a 14th century priest and theologian, lived in Germany. And one of the things she reminded me of was this saying of his that says, if the only prayer you ever offer in your whole life is thank you, it will be enough. If we want to make our lives a prayer, we have to live in gratitude. Gratitude for all the things we have, not discomfort or discontent for all the things we don't have. Let's be grateful for everything that we have. And the more I rack up the years, the more I realize that even the things that were the worst experiences of my life actually had a very good effect. So begin to trust God more and more, that what He is leading you through is for your own good. Everything works together for good for those who love God. That's what the Bible says. So I'm reminded of Jeremiah in the Bible saying, I have plans for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future, to bring you joy. So if we think more in terms of partnership with God, really, who could have created us? The more I learn about the human body, the more amazed I am at its complexity and its amazing engineering. How could this be random? How could any of this be random? It's the Creator who is a spirit, like we as a soul are spirits. That's what way that we need to relate to God and to this life. So as we go through all that we suffer and enjoy in this world, let's keep in mind the words of Yogananda when he said that we need to be living in the moment quietly, in every moment, not thinking of the future, not thinking of the past, but live quietly in this moment. And he said to behold the beauty that is in front of you. And that means the things, the people, the environment, all the beauty. See the beauty in this world. And then the future will take care of itself. So I wanted to just close by telling a story about St. John of the Cross. And he had a wonderful bit of wisdom to share with us, which is that if we endure darkness, it is preparation for great light. So when we look at this world and think, oh my God, everything's falling apart, the environment, the climate, the politics, the world, it's all in uproar. Step back and have a broader perspective. In that way, we can worship God, even in everything that's happening. We can be even-minded and live in joy, no matter what the circumstances are. This story of St. John is very dear to my heart. St. John of the Cross. Now, he was a contemporary of St. Teresa of Avila, and he was very inspired by St. Teresa, and they became very close. He was her confessor. And she wanted to have all these changes in the Carmelite order. She wanted to bring the convent back to being focused on God. It had become sort of a social thing, and the nuns could entertain suitors in the parlor, that sort of thing. It was not exactly God-focused. And meanwhile, the male Carmelites, of which St. John was one, had many privileges and perks, you might say, and they were not eager to give up anything. So Teresa and John both came up against a lot of resistance in trying to make life more God-centered. And St. John was captured by these fellow monks, held in prison in a small room with bars on the window. He just had some rags on the floor to sleep on and hardly fed him. They gave him a cup of water and a little crust of bread every few days, and then sometimes they forgot even that. So he was weakened, he was cold, and then the best part for them was that every night they dragged him out and beat him. So he would go back to his cell after being beaten every night, and in his mind, he didn't have anything to write on, he would compose a stanza of a love poem to God. And every night, the same thing would happen. They'd drag him out and beat him, and he'd come back, and he would remember the night before and all the stanzas he had composed in his mind. This is like one of the most famous mystical poems in the Spanish language, which has come down to us today. And after some time, this poem was completed, and the Divine Mother appeared to John in that little cell with those rags? And she said, and remember, he's weakened, he's beaten, he's been prisoner for weeks. And she says to him, get up and leave this place. And he goes to the window, bars on the window, and he moves the bars out of the way. And he takes the rags and he makes a rope, ties them together, ties them to the bars, slips through the window, goes down to the end of the rope. Oh, but it's not to the ground. No moon, it's completely dark. He has to just trust, and he drops into the air, and he lands on a garbage heap. And he startles a white dog that he can see even in the dark. And this dog takes off running, and St. John follows the dog. And the dog leads him through all these streets, a maze of streets. And he's running and running after this dog. And he hears the monks. They have discovered he's missing. And they have taken to the streets and they're chasing him. And he's just in the hands of God. What can he do? He just follows this little dog. And the dog jumps over a low wall. And so John goes right after him over the wall. And he's lying there, completely exhausted. He has no idea where he is. He has no idea what to do. And he hears singing, women's voices singing. Oh, they're singing to God. He follows the song. And he realizes that he's in one of St. Teresa's convents. And so the nuns lovingly, they know who he is, they take him in. And he's resting in the infirmary where none of those other monks could find him. So as we go through this time in history, and let's remember that endurance of the darkness is great preparation for the light. And let's be at peace in ourselves. If we want world peace, this is the place to start. So let's find that peace and stillness within. Meister Eckhart also said, the greatest achievement, the greatest attainment in this life is to become still so that God can act and speak in us. That's what we want, that's what we need. To have that guidance, to have that intuition that helps us to do the right thing, make the right choice, and finally to find our way home back to God.
This week's Sunday service falls just before Memorial Day, and it occurred to me that Memorial Day, honoring as it does those who have died in service, is a helpful image for us, you might say. I'm thinking in particular of three people that we had the blessing of knowing. And in the case of Yogananda, we came to know him through Swami Kriya-yoga. But he offered his life in service. And I remember reading from talks that he gave many years before that. He said, I choose to die with my boots on. And he did. And he was giving a talk in front of a lot of people and left the body in that moment. And Swami Kriya-yoga had an interesting role in this, you could say, or connection to this, because Yogananda had told Swami Kriyananda, death itself will be your final sacrifice, the final sacrifice you have to make. And I remember we puzzled over that, and even to a degree, I think he puzzled over it as well, because we all kind of assumed that that meant he would be martyred because he's well known, because he's an exponent of yoga and these teachings, and yoga can be considered a four-letter word in certain circles. It's not always well appreciated, but that wasn't in the final analysis. I don't think that was Yogananda's meaning to Swami, was martyrdom in that sense. It was that he would not have control over his death. He would have to offer that up as well, because otherwise, as he was connected to these practices and teachings, he would otherwise know, he would otherwise have the sense, but he just had to offer that up. And Swami's last word, I love this. It's a very helpful thing for us to tune into. His last word was anything. His nurse was asking him, I believe at the moment she was asking him, could she please take his blood sugar, because she thought he was potentially in a diabetic shock, because she knew he was struggling with something but didn't quite know what. And it seems that Swami had probably had a stroke in that moment and could no longer hear her, even with the hearing aids in. And rather than try to sleuth out what she was saying and try to answer accordingly in minute detail, he just said anything, whatever you want. It was as if he was saying to Divine Mother, anything, whatever you want, I'll do it, anything you want. And it's helpful for us to recognize that we too are channels of light. We too are channels of service. And a third person in our connection, whose picture we still keep in our home prominently, Nayaswami Seva, left her body just minutes after finishing a shift in the Shrine of the Master's boutique down at Crystal Hermitage. She walked back to her place, just not very far, just a couple hundred yards, and left the body 10, 15 minutes later at the age of 87 or 88 or something like that. And it was a life of service. Her name means service. So we can think of that for ourselves. Obviously, this is not traditional military service, and I appreciate that as well. I remember reading once that each new soldier who comes into that role, or sailor or Marine or whatever you could say, it's as if they write a blank check. They sign a blank check up to and including their life as an offering. I will do whatever is required of me, and it may include my life. And we could all do well to offer our lives in service to something bigger than ourselves. And that's part of what this topic is referring to. Swami Kriyananda had an experience many years ago when he lived in India. This is long before we lived with him in India. This is probably 50, 60 years ago. And he was at a temple and had been praying and meditating there for quite some time. And when he finished, the priest came to him and asked him a little bit about what he was doing. And Swami said he had been meditating and praying. And the man asked, well, what do you pray for? And he said, I pray for the love of God. I pray for the ability to receive God's love more fully. I pray for others. I pray for the upliftment of the world. And the pujari, the priest, was very surprised by this. It was like, nobody does that. And Swami was equally surprised. He said, well, what do people pray for? He said, oh my God, they pray for money, they pray for a husband, a wife, children, the home, the job, the, all the things that people get all excited and worked up about. And so part of this topic, what is the best way to worship? What is the best way to pray? Part of it is just simply a reminder that we try at all. I mean, it's better to pray for something than nothing at all. I mean, at least, and it's interesting. Swami made this point. The Indian scriptures have all sorts of intriguing rituals for how to get rich, how to get a good marriage, how to have lots of children if that's what you're after, how to have worldly fulfillment. And you think, good Lord, why on earth would they clutter up the pages of their scriptures with this stuff? Well, what they realized is, look, people are going to do it anyway. They might as well do it in a spiritual way. If they're going to look for it, they might as well ask God for it. I remember when I came to Ananda in the late 70s, there was a group that was popular in America at the time called Supertramp, and one of their the lead singer was a member of Ananda. And so there was a time when he was connected. In fact, I was at Crystal Hermitage one Christmas when he and his wife came over and wanted to greet Swamiji, and they presented him very proudly with a signed copy of their latest album, the big LP style vinyl album. And it was very sweet, and he received it very graciously. It was very sweet with them. But anyway, back to the band, there were obviously a lot of young people and a lot of long hair, including mine, believe it or not. I did have long hair at one time. And a bunch of them really wanted to go to the concert that was in Oakland when the group came. I don't remember what year it was. And of course, people didn't have a lot of money, and it was a big deal to do something like this. And there was a mild controversy around it, because it's like, well, why are you going to this noisy rock concert, whatever? But it was like, no, I mean, it was like, offer it to God. And so people did. There were a few people who went, and I believe I heard, I wasn't at that concert, I never went to one, but that band member identified them in the audience because he knew that they were there. And so the whole place got to hear that there are members from Ananda, and thank you for coming and welcome, and et cetera. So it was very sweet. But it was, I remember being sort of amazed that even something so seemingly worldly could be offered up. In other words, it didn't have to sort of be hidden. Oh, quick, let's keep that in the closet. Let's keep that covered up and hidden, and let's not talk about it. It was very natural, and it was very sweet. Look, if we're going to do this, then let's offer it up and ask for God's blessing, ask for Master's blessing on the rock concert. I mean, it seems a little crazy to me, but people were into it. Fine, great. I mean, what we got to see was this broad life of how do you live it? And going back to the Bhagavad Gita reading, sequestered should he sit, solitary, passion laid away, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, great. Well, what if it isn't? What if it's all tangled up? What if you're very much restless and not solitary and still, and you're all wiggly, and I mean, people are in all sorts of shape. I mean, it's not always great fun to sit and try to be still. Does anybody recall back as a child when you got in trouble for whatever it was, and go sit in the corner and be still, or just sit still? And it would and you're just all itchy and wiggly, and it's like, it's really hard for a kid to sit still. They get full of beans and they just want to go run around. Well, that's kind of how we are on the inside. Just because you plant yourself in the chair doesn't mean that everybody else inside is going to obey. They go, yeah, well, guess again, I want to do something different. But see, the thing is, we don't achieve fulfillment on a certain level of our being. We don't achieve fulfillment unless and until we achieve some degree of stillness, some degree of just ability to be quiet and hear and feel, because God doesn't scream at us. You know, John of the Cross gets to the end of the rope, literally, you might say, and has to drop onto the garbage dump and find a white dog and scare the crud out of a white dog who takes off running, and he has to figure out what to do. Am I going to, okay, well, let's follow the white dog. I don't know. We get to the place where we've run into situations we don't know. I think there is this thought that the further you go on the path, the more you should know exactly what to do in every situation. And it's more like you become more and more open to anything. Whatever it is, I'm ready to try. I'm ready to exercise the process of attunement, of listening, of feeling, of trying. Does it mean that we automatically get every single thing right? That there's never a misstep? That there's never a, oops, I turned on the correct street, but it was the court, not the avenue, and it goes into the cul-de-sac, and you make a circle around the cul-de-sac and you come back out and you try for the next street, which is the actual avenue or the road or the drive or whatever it is. It can happen. But that ability to be still means that we can hear, finally, what is the Divine Mother saying? And if we're going to serve lovingly with great self-offering, if we're going to be kind in this world, as the affirmation is saying, if we're going to see the whole world as my home and the human race my family, we have to be able to perceive that we are bigger than just this body, just this personality, just the who do I think that I am. Otherwise, meditation can kind of reaffirm it's me, it's all about me and how spiritual I am and how, ... Kindness and service break down that sense of this me that's so important. And then we can just offer it. And then we too can say anything. Whatever you want, Divine Mother, anything I will do. Anything that you ask, I will give my heart to it and try my best to make something good come of it in this world. And when we can do that, then Divine Mother's with us. We come to realize that Divine Mother's not just with us in the sense that we see Divine Mother in the faces of all those around us. We can feel her presence in our heart and in our lives and know that she's always with us. Even if no one is around us, she's with us on the inside.